Hello, so this idea of sensory immersion for success, or what has traditionally been called creative visualization, has generated a lot of attention. To a large extent, this movie, The Secret, that became very famous a few years ago, is all about creative visualization or sensory immersion. Now, at first sight, if you watch the movie, if you read the book, if you read a few websites on creative visualizations, it might seem that it's a trivial thing. They might seem like an easy thing to do. And if it is so easy, how come we're not all using it? And what really happens is this. Remember, I've been doing this for 21 years. I've helped hundreds of people, thousands of people with all kinds of goals and objectives through creative visualization. And what we discover is that when they do it on their own, the process doesn't quite work because there are a few details in there that need to be learned and mastered before we can effectively create situations in our lives through this power of the mind, through the law of mentalism as it's known in esoteric circles. So today, I'd like to give you some examples of what I have achieved with creative visualization, with sensory immersion, and examples from other people whom I've helped through this particular process. I also would like an opportunity to explain to you why we exchange the terminology between creative visualization, sometimes visualization, and sometimes what I consider to be the more appropriate term, which is sensory immersion. So let's talk about this. First of all, let me give you some examples of what you can do. When I was about 12 years old, I started racing bicycles, and my then coach showed me how to imagine myself, see myself in my mind's eye, crossing the finish line at the end of the race, successfully crossing the finishing line. And I started practicing that, and given the resources that I had, of course, very little time to practice and so forth, I actually did somewhat well. I won a few races. Later on, I came to the United States and I raced cross country on the track and field, and I did a few good things with it. And up until I was 23 years of age, I was still racing and got a couple trophies and a couple medals and here and there. So I attribute a great deal of the partial success that I had. I never became an Olympic champion or anything. I never steered my life in that direction. But considering how much effort I put into it, I would say that a great deal of the partial success that I experienced could be attributed to the power of visualization or sensory immersion. I was very young then, and I hadn't yet become aware of the secrets of visualization, as you will learn as we embark on this experience. Later on, I did learn some of the secrets, and I was able to help many athletes do a whole bunch of really interesting things, such as avoiding injuries, winning more, sticking to a particular training regimen. I mean, all kinds of things. I remember one young boy came here once. He was about the age I was when I was racing, 12, 13 years of age. And he was a dancer, a very complex sort of dancer. And he wanted to learn this particular maneuver. He showed it to me in videos, very complicated. They would jump up in the air, rotate a few times up in the air, land a certain way, almost like like a gymnastics sort of thing, but it was like a dance thing, a very sophisticated and specialized modality of dancing that he was training to become some sort of expert in. But he couldn't do this particular move. So he came over, we visualized the move according to the lessons that you're also going to learn, and he was able to master the technique and went on to win tournaments and so forth. He was able to do something with that. So the point I'm making is that you can actually achieve a great deal physically by seeing it happening in your mind's eye before you actually do it physically. There's a classical experiment that I think was published in 1996 out of the University of Chicago, where they took a group of students and had them free throw a basketball into the hoop. And they got an average number of times that each student was able to put the ball through the hoop. Then they divided them into 3 random groups and had one group practice throwing the ball into the hoop for 1 month at the gym. They would actually practice this for a whole month, every day. The second group only visualized throwing the ball into the hoop. And the third group, what they call the control group, didn't do anything for a whole month. At the end of the month, they all got together again and again shot the ball into the hoop, and they actually measured the improvement. Well, as you can expect, the group that practiced for a month improved 24%. But the interesting thing is that the group who never touched the ball for an entire month, but only visualized the ball going into the hoop, improved by an impressive 23%, almost the same amount. In other words, seeing something happen before it happens it actually makes that event more likely to happen. Over the years, I've purchased properties, and in every single case, I purchased those properties without looking at them. I would visualize a particular type of property that I wanted, and when one came into my awareness, in other words, when I found a particular property, I would read about it or see it online, whatever the case is, I knew that that was the one that corresponded to my visualization. In every single case, that was the case. But not only that, I didn't have the money to buy any of them. Any money just showed up. Again, visualization. Now, I don't mean for this to sound, I don't mean to exaggerate and to make false claims here. I don't mean to say that a pile of cash somehow showed up at my front door. I don't mean anything like that. What I mean is, technically I couldn't have afforded those properties, but I got paid here, something happened over there, maybe sold a car here, did a few maneuvers here and there, but magically somehow the money showed up and the closing happened smoothly and everything went according to plan. And you see, but very, very easy, smooth transactions that for some other people, they become very difficult things. And that's not all. I have helped hundreds of people prosper to amazing degrees with the power of sensory immersion. I remember one man came to see me. He had a very small business and he struggled a lot, and he told me that he made $15,000 a year in this very small business of his. He never thought of the power of duplicating himself. He never thought of hiring other people and expanding his operation. It just never occurred to him. It didn't occur to me either, and I didn't tell him that because I'm not a business advisor or anything like this. I help people get in touch with their true selves, discover their own true potential within themselves, and I help them visualize the sorts of results that they want to achieve in their lives. And this is exactly what I helped that man do. And he somehow saw himself grow. And he told me that 6 months later, I saw him again here at the office, and he told me that by then he had doubled his salary. He had 4 people working with him. He had doubled his salary in a span of 6 months by expanding, by doing things that were all within him and within his ability and possibility, but it had never occurred to him before. In other words, by visualizing better results, he was able to unleash his own potential and take steps that before the visualization he had not taken. And the steps that he took didn't come from me. I didn't suggest to him. I didn't tell him, do this, do that, do that. I didn't tell him that. He came up with all of this on his own. It was his business after all. And I can tell you all kinds of other examples like this. In fact, I have documented over the years, people who come here and we use these techniques always expand their prosperity in every way. So I can tell you other examples. How about when I did my PhD dissertation, my doctoral dissertation? I got into this project that was very unique. Instead of, I was hired as a PhD student to work on a particular project that had already funding and had already a description and was already approved and so forth. And I worked on that project for about 6 months or so, but it was programming intensive. I had to program computers a whole lot. And at the time, I didn't really want to sit all day inside of an office programming a computer to then make a point or prove a hypothesis or disprove a hypothesis. I didn't want to build that entire computer program. So I decided to kind of go rogue on my own and come up with my own problems, study my own things and do my own things. And everybody thought it was crazy at the time. Number one, because of the funding, where do you get the money to do the studies? Also it was an expensive and also an unlikely hypothesis that I was attempting to prove as a PhD student. Plus, you have your coursework, I have to teach classes, I have to all these other things that we have to do as a student, and And I wanted to do this very unique project. Well, I worked on it for 2 years and I couldn't come up with a solution. And then, you know, if you're not familiar with that type of thing, it might seem a little weird, but, you know, you come up with an idea, you begin to investigate, you do a literature search, you begin to plan some experiments, you begin to formulate some hypotheses, and you work on the theory behind it, you derive a few equations, and you work, because you gotta show this mathematically, experimentally, you know, you gotta do a few things, and 6 months might go by, and you realize that you're not going anywhere because you're not going anywhere with it. So you try something else, and you try something else, and by the time you try 2 or 3 ideas, 2 years have gone by, you've exhausted your budget, you've, 2 years have gone by, and you have a life to live, and you have to get out of school and do something, right? So I remember one day, I believe it was a Thursday night, it was a little bit desperate, I'll tell you, thinking that I was kind of stuck and not really knowing what to do, but I told myself, I said, you know what, as long as they don't kick me out of the university, I'm going to keep on chugging along until I get a solution here, because I had an idea originally, my original idea, and I think I can prove this. I just don't know how, whatever. No. But I decided to, and I remember exactly where I was at the lab at the university. I closed my eyes, I was alone at the lab, and I went into this state that you have to learn to go into in order to visualize effectively. And I visualized myself defending my dissertation, successfully defending the dissertation. That's all. Because this is one of the tricks that you're going to learn. This is one of the secrets. We're always going to visualize the end result. There's a whole science behind this. That's why there's a whole course that we have to take to learn exactly how to do this. Well, let me tell you what happened. The same night when I was going home, I didn't, back then, I didn't have the money to park on campus. You know, you had to buy a sticker to park on campus. I didn't have the money to do that, which didn't bother me. I parked way off campus, and I had about a half an hour walk before I could get to the car. And as I'm walking to the car, I got this idea. You know, this idea came to my mind. Oh my gosh, how come I never thought of it before? So I ran to the car, drove home as fast as I could, and the first piece of paper I could grab, I scribbled a few equations, and I had an idea. I could hardly wait to get back to the lab the next morning, and I started working on it, and it wasn't even 3 months later, I had my dissertation. Then I had a couple months more, I had to write it up, whatever, and I published it, and everything was awesome. I was able to make the point that I wanted to make. I was able to prove something the way that I wanted to prove, and the idea that unlocked it all, the idea that made it all possible, came to me as a result of visualizing. Up until then, for about 2 years, I was completely stuck. Now, I cannot tell you the number of people that have come here with whom we have used creative visualization or sensory immersion, who have been able to unlock all kinds of mental sorts of objectives. I remember one man came here once, true story. He was a physician in a different country, but in this country, when you come here, you still have to take the boards, what they call the national boards. There's a really complex exams, like 8-9 hours long, a bunch of questions, and they're difficult. So he had already taken it a couple of times and he hadn't passed. But we worked together, we visualized the results, and he took the exam again and he passed it. And exam passing is something that we've kind of taken a little liking towards, and I have helped literally hundreds of people pass all kinds of difficult exams, from SATs to MCATs, LSATs, all kinds of professional exams that people were stuck with. But then all we have to do is follow the process that you're about to learn. We have to clear the mind from all these preoccupations, limiting thoughts, limiting emotions, and then we have to learn how to immerse ourselves in the desired result. This is what sensory immersion is all about. Another interesting situation, a man comes here once and he had been playing soccer or something over the weekend and he actually broke his foot. Something happened and he broke his foot. He comes in here. He was already in therapy doing something else here, but one Monday he shows up with a cast on his foot. And I asked him, how long did your doctor tell you have to wear this cast? And he says, well, I believe it was about 9 weeks. I believe it was what he told me. And I asked him, how long do you want to keep it on? And he said something like 4 weeks or something like this. So I said, okay. We began to visualize the bones mending and whatever the process is, the foot healing, basically, the end result, the doctor removing the cast. in about 4 weeks, and he could see the date in his mind's eye and so forth, And 4 weeks later, I forgot it was 4 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever. I remember it was about half of the time frame that the doctor had told him, considering the type of fracture, considering his age and so forth. He was given a time frame of, say, 10 weeks, and he wanted to do 5 weeks or something like that. And the bottom line is that when he went back for an exam at the time frame that he had chosen, which was 5 or 6 weeks, whatever the time was, the doctor says, my gosh, the bone is completely fused. They took an x-ray, everything is fine. I can actually remove the cast and put you on a boot that you can wear when you have to stand, whatever, but you're pretty much ready to come off the cast. So the doctor says, it's interesting. I've been a doctor for something like 20 years. I've never seen this kind of a fracture heal so fast. What have you done? What's going on? There's no question nowadays, and there's a whole bunch of studies showing the interaction between body and mind, all kinds of studies. So when we do our medical applications course, we can talk more about this, how people have been aiding their bodies in healing diseases through the power of creative visualization or sensory immersion. This has a really long history. I remember back in the 70s, I believe it was, or early 80s, Dr. Carl Simonton was doing some studies with children who had cancer, and he would teach them to imagine a Pacman. Pacman, if you're too young, you may not remember, Pacman was a video game that had a little figure that would eat up a little monster or something, and this doctor would teach his patients to imagine a little Pacman eating the cancer away, and these kids who have a really awesome time imagining things would imagine this, and he would actually get tumor remission, partial in some cases or complete in others, but there was actually a measurable effect there. All of this stems from the power of sensory immersion. And this is the sort of thing that you can use in your life to change your physical life. And speaking of physical life, we have helped thousands of people achieve their ideal weight. Now you might say to me, wow, I don't really care about my figure. I'm already married. I'm not shopping for a spouse anymore. I don't have to look good. But I'm here to tell you, adjusting your weight isn't just about looking a certain way. Number one, it totally changes how you see yourself. It totally changes how others see you. It totally changes your level of confidence. It totally changes your life. Number one, it changes how you feel. It changes how you get out of bed. It changes how you feel during the day. It changes how you sleep. It even changes your ability to have intimacy. It changes everything. Adjusting your weight, because your health level increases, it improves. Now, why do you think that insurance companies, like life insurance companies, pay a whole lot of attention to the person's weight? And actually, rates of life insurance are higher. The cost, the price is higher if the person is overweight. Why do you think that is? Because it is a proven fact that if a person is overweight, they have a higher likelihood of dying. Therefore, life insurance rates are higher. See, this is not medical insurance. In other words, not only is a person who's overweight more likely to have illnesses, and any illness that a person has becomes more complicated. Forget about surgery. If a person is severely overweight, surgery sometimes is an impossibility in some cases. But we're not talking about illnesses. We're talking about death. Life insurance companies, those that pay you if a person dies, pay your relatives if you die, they charge more if the person is overweight because they know that the likelihood of dying actually increases if a person is overweight. Let's not even talk about diabetes and the scourge, the way that it decreases the quality of life for that person. So being overweight isn't just a matter of how you look, whether or not you're okay looking that way. It totally changes your life in every regard. Now, in my 21 years here at the office, I have seen people adjust their weight and get promotions, get married, make more money, because their whole lives change. Like I said, it's not just, oh, I look better. No. Everything changes. Now I dare to go out more. I dare to talk to people. You see, everything changes. And how do we do that, do you think? We do that through the power of sensory immersion and the visualization of the end result. We call this end result imagery, end result visualization. You see, so you can achieve a complete transformation in your physical life, in your financial life, in your relationships in your life, because every relationship, speaking of relationships, right, every relationship is based on certain habits as well. In other words, after a while of knowing that person, whether it's a spouse, children, boss, neighbor, it doesn't really matter. We kind of get into a groove. We kind of get used to one another. And I know the guy's that way. I know him this way. So we kind of interact a certain way. And we get into the habit, and the relationships kind of stall eventually. Marriages become sour because we get into habits. What if you could imagine, what if you could visualize yourself going to the next level, overcoming those barriers, changing habits that you might have, that your spouse may have told you about, that could actually make you a better husband, a better wife? What if you could actually visualize the other person coming more in touch with who they really are, and you could actually use creative visualization to help other people be happier? All of this is possible, and all of these are the types of things that you and I are going to study together. But there's more. What about what your life means to you? What about your spiritual life? And I'm not talking about religion here. I'm not trying to convince you of my beliefs. That's not what this is about. We all have beliefs. We all believe in something. We all have thoughts, ideas about the purpose of this life. How about getting more and more in touch with that so that you can feel more in tune with who you truly are? We can do all of this with these techniques that you can learn. Now, I have to be honest with you. I have known about this for many, many, many years. But I learned all of these techniques within the context of secrecy. In other words, I learned about this under the promise that I wouldn't divulge the secrets outside of the context within which I learned all of this. And for many years, I would practice or help people achieve results without really teaching what's behind it or how to actually get certain things done. But times have changed, and I have been authorized to expand these points of view and share it with you. Times have changed, the world has changed, and the need has arrived. The moment, the timing has arrived. The moment is here where more people need to be in touch with who they really are. These are trying times. These are defining times that we're living. You've seen acts of violence, you've seen wars, you've seen environmental types of disasters, you've seen all kinds of things. The situation is a little bit complex. And people sometimes are desperate, afraid, and we need solutions that governments and outside authorities just cannot provide. Only you can get in touch with you and save yourself and help your family. So it's about time we begin to explore these ideas further and use the power that we are actually given as human beings to improve the quality of our lives. Now, as long as we're talking about improving the quality of our lives, let's talk about terminology for a moment. Why is it that we keep on exchanging the terms between visualization and sensory immersion? Well, visualization implies that we're going to see something with our eyes closed. And many people tell me, well, Flavio, I cannot see it. I just don't see what you're talking about. And I understand that. But it isn't quite like that. You don't necessarily have to actually see with your eyes closed. Some people do, some people may or may not. But it's not quite like that. We kind of immerse ourselves in that particular situation that represents the end result that we wish. And we immerse ourselves with all of our senses, including the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th sense, however many senses we have. In other words, the gut feeling, the feeling that I'm there. Not just the smells, sights, and sounds, but actually the feeling that I'm here. And we learn how to do this because in order to do this, there are 3 steps that we have to accomplish before actually visualizing. And then we have to get our minds into a particular state, and then we can visualize. So there's a technique to all of this. These techniques have been developed over the years, and you and I have an opportunity to study them together, practice them together, and actually carry out interesting experiments. I'm glad that you're considering joining me for these experiments. We're going to have a good time, and we're going to learn a whole lot, and most importantly, the quality of your life will definitely improve right into the next level. The level that you have been hoping and dreaming about for a long time and just didn't really have the tools to get it done. Now you do. Awesome.